Before I close the public hearing, is there anything that the council would like to, or we're just going to discussion and close the public hearing on this item? That concludes public comment slips and taking comments from the council. We have before us some options as well as a recommendation from staff to continue the moratorium for one more year. Any comments?
Yeah, I'll start. I think, my heart goes out to the woman who came up discussing her case, and I have to say I have no problem with medical marijuana when it's taken for people with serious ailments like cancer, heart problems, that sort of thing, who cannot tolerate normal drugs or need them as an adjunct. I really understand that issue. My problem is I have an experience. There's a small mountain town in Colorado where there are 10,000 people. I go there usually every fall. And for 10,000 people, there are no less than 8 marijuana dispensaries in a town that small. Now, I know we're talking Colorado, but their laws became very strict because of this. And what concerns me are the fringe parts of this. I worry about law enforcement. There was a robbery the other day I saw, armed robbery, that sort of thing. I don't want to bring that into our community. And so how do we couch this ordinance so that if we do an ordinance, that it's tight and safe for everybody, non-user and user alike? And that's the conundrum that I see that is quite difficult. I don't know, but I always thought the federal law trumped state law. Is that true, Ms. Attorney, or is it the most restrictive of the laws that trumps the other?
I think it depends on a particular situation and whether federal law has language that says we occupy the field on this particular issue. And I think, in fact, that's what the federal government and the state of Arizona are kind of fighting over at this point on their immigration law. So
right.
it would depend on the legislation that you're talking about.
So there's no answer to my question.
I think on this particular case, I think on this particular issue, the decisions that have come out of the state of California have said federal law does not preempt the Compassionate Use Act and the medical marijuana issue. This issue of Government Code 37100 that says cities cannot adopt ordinances that are in violation of state or federal law.
Right.
I don't believe that issue has been specifically addressed in cases. And the video presentation by Mr. Boyd showed that the County Board of Supervisors, County Council acknowledged that 37100 does not apply to counties. It does apply to cities. So
it does apply.
Right. And so the cities that are banning medical marijuana, that's part of the basis they're using is we're not allowed to adopt ordinances that are in violation of federal law because of this government code section. Maybe the Anaheim case has more explanation on that, maybe it doesn't. You know, other cities, as you see with part of the agenda packet, the Western Cities magazine, the League of California Cities put out, you know, attorneys and cities are taking different approaches on this. So
right.
That's kind of a long answer to your question, but
no, but that does trouble me because we're caught, you know, as you'd say in Greek legends, between Scylla and Charybdis. There we are, right in the middle, not knowing which way to go. So if we're in violation of federal law, if we acquiesce to state law, and then the other way around, I know Eric Holder, the federal Attorney General, said that they would not be following and prosecuting. So we could take a chance looking at that, because that's what it said. That was in April, wasn't it? April of this year, 2010?
I believe so.
I believe so. I thought I read it somewhere. What with the grand jury report and this particular item, you know, it's trying to keep the things straight. I think also a friend of mine who lives in Imperial Beach is seriously ill, has both cancer and multiple sclerosis, was desperate because of the pain and had one of these doctors come down, and she said It was most unpleasant because it was clandestine and she felt uncomfortable, and he charged her $500 for the consultation. And then in the end, when she eventually got, she didn't have a card, I don't think. She was too sick to get that. But when she did get the marijuana, it didn't work. So, but seriously, this is an issue, and those of us who suffer pain have to be taken into consideration. What I don't want to see are people that come in and use the system for trick knees or whatever it happens to be. My feeling is that we should go ahead and prepare the ordinance and we would have to look at the zoning and everything else that goes with it. We can't discuss it all night, it could take too long. But if we could do that, run the moratorium, and then as soon as that ordinance is finished, then we can lift the moratorium. Makes much sense to me. In the meantime, I'm told, though I haven't seen it, that there are a couple of dispensaries on Palm Avenue outside the city limits where people, if they're really desperate, if they got their ID from the county, can actually go down and purchase marijuana. Is that correct? I've heard it. I assume there's a place, I heard down by Rally's,
Yes.
in that shopping center.
Yes, that is
down
correct. That is correct.
there. Right. But anyway, that's how I feel about it. No,
Mr. King, you have something?
I think it's important.
In 1996, the electorate of California spoke and said they wanted medical marijuana. It was maybe 2008 where it really started getting into wide use. And last year, it was like the wild, wild west in Los Angeles. My God, I don't know how many, 170 clinics open. They were unregulated. It was an absolute mess. Why are we sitting here today? We're sitting here to make sure we don't create a bigger mess. I fully agree with the legislation. Voters passed it. I would support it myself. At the same time, those who say, hey, the county, they gave you guidelines. Well, what they say here, one of their pages is, I need to read this, this is important. Excuse me 1 second, let me find my page. Basically say they recommend I'm looking for it here. Bear with me a moment, please. They basically recommend that you use a moratorium, enact a moratorium on the opening of dispensaries. They're basically saying that it would be nice for the county, the sheriff's department, the county, this DA, to develop standards and to develop criteria for how we regulate these, and that everybody use those. And what they're saying is that if you don't have those in place, have a moratorium. Now, what we're facing tonight is that there's some people who are asking, hey, you know, don't extend the moratorium. Well, we're here to represent the entire city, all of the people in this city and all of their respective needs. And to, at this point, if we were to not extend this moratorium, what we'd basically say is that, go ahead, do it the way you want to do it, because we don't have anything in place that tells people, gives them a guideline, gives them a map for how to implement this. And I concur with Councilmember McCoy and I brought this up in the last meeting, that I felt that we should move forward in drafting a preliminary draft of an ordinance that could move this forward at such time as it becomes necessary. The moratorium can be vacated at any time that we choose to go ahead and adopt an ordinance. And I would like to see that preliminary effort begun for the reasons that it is the law and for the reasons that we can't just throw the ordinance out or the moratorium out and leave it wide open for people to do what they want. That's all I really have to comment right now.
Ms. Bragg?
Thank you. Ms. Lyon, if you could, is there any reason why the moratorium has to be a year? This extension has to be a year?
No, I think we did that so that the city has the year, because that's what the law allows. If you want to change the amount of time on that, you can do that.
Okay, thank you for that. I made an observation. I was at a business on Palm Avenue, there by Rallies, and got into a discussion with a business owner who was very concerned that a medical marijuana clinic had opened up right next door to him. And it was not locked. Anybody could walk in. He'd walk in and out, in and out. Their hours are later than most of the businesses there in that shopping center. And what was really disturbing to this business owner is that the property owner hadn't asked any of the other businesses there, do you have any objections? They had no idea that that was coming. So they were, this particular business owner was just blindsided by it and was greatly disturbed. Granted, that's the city of San Diego. Having said that, let me say that that was the city of San Diego, and their city limits are right up against ours. So they already got one. It's here. People can go right down on Palm Avenue right now and be able to access medical marijuana. So, they're here, and I think that it would be prudent upon us to. I think we're going to have to get an ordinance ourselves. If not, the city of San Diego is going to be letting them come in all over the place. Who knows where else they'll let them come? I don't know. If they have I don't know if they have any, if their ordinance says if you've got one here, you can't have one in another block and another block and another block. And next thing we know, that all of Palm Avenue in the city of San Diego, there'll be a proliferation of medical marijuana clinics. I do have to state that I too, Mr. Rivera, have suffered from pain. Most of you know I had a hip replacement 8 years ago and spent the first 3 years after that replacement heavily sedated due to pain, and made the choice one day that I could not live like that anymore. So I quit taking my prescribed drugs, which were triplicate forms of heroin, and I just deal with it now. I don't take anything. But it's an easy road. So, thank you.
Thank you. I do have some other speakers want to say. I'm going to say something, because in our staff report, an option is put out there that we request the city staff to submit a set of proposed regulations for dispensaries in order to begin the discussion. And listening to Ms. McCoy, Mr. King, I think that's really, we have to go with a moratorium, because you can't open it for free-for-all, as Mr. King was mentioning. The year, I don't think is a really big thing, because if we can come up with proper regulation for what we feel is adequate for Imperial Beach, the moratorium can be lifted. There is the issue that if we enact an ordinance, it has to be at least submitted to the California Coastal Commission. Doesn't mean that they'll take any action on it, but we have to give them that opportunity. And I think what we have before us is strictly something to extend that moratorium. And if Mr. Boyd, if you remember, when we first discussed this 1 year ago, or over a year ago, that was the direction we were going in. Some things came about, such as the Anaheim case, what the city of San Diego was doing, and we're a small city on the block here, and we wouldn't want to take on extraordinary legal expenses to do this. I think what the example of what happened over in San Diego, I mean, they're across the street from each other. I mean, what we discussed way back when with at least, have some distances between things. And those are the things that I think that we need to look at. So what I'm looking at supporting this evening is extending the moratorium, but asking staff to come back within a reasonable time frame here with some proposals of what kind of regulations we could put on it, the costs involved in those regulations. And as everybody knows, costs are not strictly in monetary costs, but in staff costs, whether it be staff of the city of Imperial Beach, the San Diego Sheriff's Department, whomever else we'd have to get involved in it. I think that's where we really need to go with this, is to move forward on this and figure out what is possible to do. And I know other cities have, in our report here, we have loose regulations, which they mentioned San Diego, and obviously it's a little loose over there if they can be across the street from each other. Or you can have very tight regulations. Those might be too cumbersome. But other cities, such as the City of Oakland and others, have come up with ways to make this work where they're not everywhere. LA just didn't watch. So that's why we had 180 or something up there. And that's what I'm thinking that we should be doing this evening, is extending the moratorium and giving staff direction to propose regulations and bring them forward with us and see as a council what we think might be workable here in the city of Imperial Beach. As Mr. King mentioned, it is something the voters approved. I'm a little disappointed, Mr. Boyd, because you were with that group in the beginning. I did ask for the voting numbers for the precincts of Imperial Beach to see how that vote went in 1996 and the years after. And I never did get that information, so I'm not sure if I'm working for the people of Imperial Beach or for the people of California. So I think that really makes a difference to this council up here. So that's my thoughts on this thing here, and we have a staff recommendation for the moratorium. Mr. King, I think you wanted to say a couple more words, and then Ms. Lyon wanted to, Ms. Rose.
Just a couple of quick comments. The incident that happened in this last week in Normal Heights, where the dispensary was robbed of about $20,000 worth of merchandise and some money. Very unfortunate incident. They had been robbed once before. Shame on them. They had a sign on their window that said they have security cameras. They didn't have one. Spend a dime. These are the kinds of things that when we put together an ordinance, we need to make sure that we do it right so that we have people protected. And now, there's an article in last week's paper in Los Angeles. There were 4 guys who went around and robbed 2 dispensaries. They killed 1 person. Now, we really don't want to bring that onto our city. We want to have some security. I was thinking about this, thinking, well, put in bulletproof glass and bulletproof stuff. It might sound kind of extreme, but these things happen. And we need to be aware of it. We need to be cautious. We need to do it right. Not faster, we need to do it smarter. And that's something I'd really like to see. I'd like to see something on the order of leaning toward the more restrictive side in terms of how we conduct our operations. And it will take, as the mayor had said, it will take a good deal of effort on the city's part to actually regulate, because that takes manpower and staff and time. And that's something that we have to figure out. And I encourage us to move forward on that.
Ms. Rose?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just wanted to start off by saying that we're looking at extending the existing moratorium, and it's really a time frame issue for us. Without extending the moratorium, I believe the staff report says that we would have, it just isn't possible for us to create an ordinance, have the readings, get it to coastal. It's just not physically possible to accomplish any of that within a timeline, no matter how quickly we might move forward. So just having said that, just looking at an extension of time isn't some sort of indictment against medical marijuana, at least not in my opinion. But having said that, I would like to just sort of caution my colleagues. I believe that maybe we're jumping the gun a little bit here. I think we really have a responsibility to our community to use the very best due diligence that we can around all of these juggling legal issues and other communities struggling with this same issue. I don't believe that Imperial Beach should necessarily be the lead in San Diego County in crafting a medical marijuana ordinance. We've got much, much bigger entities than ourselves, encompassing much, much larger geographic areas. With the city of San Diego, they have their task force that's been working on this, the county of San Diego, and I think that we need some uniformity in the regulations. What I would not like to see is Imperial Beach jumping out into the forefront and ending up with something radically different than maybe other cities or the county, and getting us into some kind of legal trouble. We've got 2 compelling articles here, very interesting. The legal basis for allowing medical marijuana operations, and equally as compelling, the legal basis for banning medical marijuana dispensaries. So, I would just urge caution in this. One of the recommendations of the staff was just to kind of hold off for a couple of months. Let's see how some of this stuff settles out. Let's see where some of the other cities end up with, because I mean it's a tough issue, and we've seen a lot of other communities that have had to deal with some very real public safety issues because of the dispensaries and the way they were operated, and we can't have that happening here in Imperial Beach. So I would just urge caution and taking it slowly with this, and even waiting, if we needed to wait a couple more months to see what happens in November, see how maybe some of the other regulations with the other cities fall out. That's where I would recommend.
Mr. Brown, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to mention, along with what Councilmember Rose mentioned, this afternoon, staff, we were talking about this, and similar to our approach in, say, curfew regulations, we do want to work closely with the sheriff and the county's approach to this, so that we don't present, the sheriff having to enforce one set of regulations in the unincorporated areas and a different set within our city. So that's the type of coordination we're planning on.
I just wanted to say, I understand what Ms. Rose is saying. However, to keep in mind, a couple of months' time to regroup and think about the possibility of putting together the ordinance would be fine. However, if we've only got the 1 year to go, how long would it take us? For example, how would it be, the city attorney, if we were to wait a little while, see what happens, and then start crafting the ordinance after that? Could we get it done in time? We couldn't get it through the postal commission, that's
I think if we come back to, we'd like to present a timeline,
okay. That would be excellent.
Assuming a period to write the ordinance, but we've got to back out some estimate of getting through the coastal commission. So we may only have 3-4 months to create something.
They are collectives and cooperatives, and the thing that puzzles me, there has to be a huge profit in there somewhere. There has to be.
It's not true.
Because it ain't going to happen otherwise.
That's not true.
We got to, Mr. Boyd's been here before, you understand.
But, sir,
It's not the
instances are
issue at the
overwhelming.
moment. It's not the issue at the moment.
Anyway, I'd be happy to talk to Ms. Boyd afterwards if you like.
Yes, ma'am, please, thank you.
And then I got an email, I don't know if the rest of you got it, from a doctor up in Northern California, and her concern was that it'd be good marijuana, that it hasn't been laced with pesticides, because if you're sick, that's the last thing you want to do. You get fungus and pesticides in the crop. Well, we don't want to be responsible for that kind of thing, so I would push to make sure that we have wording in there for that. Hey, you know, if you're sick, that's the last thing you want, a bunch of fungus in your lungs and pesticides. So, anyway, I'm just saying there are all sorts of things to consider when we're putting this together, and it's nothing we can do tonight.
No, I don't think that was on our agenda for this evening, so, Mr. King, did you want to make some further comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that I appreciate Councilmember Rose's comments. I am not advocating that we just go hell-bent for election here, even though election's coming up. That we do proceed with reasonable caution and follow some of the recommendations of the county grand jury of having a, what do they call it here? I don't have medical marijuana advisory council. I think that would, and to work in conjunction with the sheriffs, but I think that we should start reviewing what's available now and some of the things that we know having to dig further, which are basically, there's a lot of information out there, and I think we should start bringing it together.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, just